All right, so truly great show today with Steve Carroll of Findigs. It just was awesome to really dive in and look at the forward-thinking process of really not only the property management, but the leasing application process that's going to now go forward as we move into the new age of real estate investing. And Steve is CEO and co-founder at Findigs, as mentioned, a VC-backed software company making the residential leasing process fast, transparent, and fraud-proof. He has experience in both startups and real estate investing, having served as COO and co-founder at Seated App and as an associate of the structured products trading desk at Nomura. So we're really going to dive in on all kinds of things real estate investing today. It's going to give you a lot of thought about how your process can be streamlined, how we can make it easier not only on ourselves, but also on our tenants and our business. And of course, when something happens like that, where it's a win-win for both sides, that's what we love. That's what we love to talk about. And it makes everyone more money. So dive in today. You're going to hear some really great things. Let's do this. All right, so welcome back. And hey, Steve, how you doing today?
Jason, what's going on, man? Thanks for having me.
Well, Steve's coming to us from New York City, which last time we spoke, he was down in LBI and he's back into a different scene there. So we appreciate you taking the time to jump on. I'm excited to talk to you today about your platform. It's really interesting, right? Because we think of the business of multifamily, of buying properties, and a lot of it is still archaic steps, right? That we still use, potentially 100 years ago. We find a building and we go in there and we try and improve the building, make it better, and just make it occupied and make changes to it. But there's these little things that we don't pay attention to. That's when someone does pay attention to it, that's when we see disruption, right? To make the process easier, right? So we were talking on a prior podcast potentially about, virtual touring, right? So everybody would say it wouldn't work. And then all of a sudden now, when people are forced to have to do virtual touring because people are quarantined, well, it works, right? Well, there's other scenarios here where tenant screening, the processes can be almost like a dinosaur, right? It takes a lot of time. It can be a lot on the tenants who have to bring in multiple things, multiple materials, multiple items to the table. So you have come up with a process here and really a company that's targeted that part. So why don't you talk to the space and lay out what first drew you to this area? Did you have a bad tenant experience where you were actually applying for a loan? Was there something that stood out that drew you to this?
Yeah. So at a super high level, what Findigs does is it makes the residential leasing process 10 times faster, more fraud-proof, and more user-friendly. And I think you're exactly right when we talk about these processes that, we just sort of fall into. Coming from a real estate investing background, I got my career started on a Wall Street trading desk I was trading asset-backed securities. And, you think about, all these bond structures, and you could have a very complicated structure and a very complicated waterfall. But at the end of the day, what was deterministic to your returns is were the underlying people actually making the payments. So I think the same thing is true when you think about multifamily investing. There's a zillion ways that you obviously can optimize returns, and smart people like you guys and your investors think about all of those, from location to building type to even proximity to certain amenities, et cetera. But at the end of the day, are the people who you rent to going to make their payments consistently and for the duration of their leases? And very early on in my career, I saw how this process was working from the renter side of things. I was applying to my first apartment, and the process was just dismal. I had to leave my job 4 separate times to bring documents. Those documents were just printouts that I printed out at my desk. So, for all the property manager knew, I could be completely forging those. I had to go sign my lease in person. I had to wait 4 or 5 days for them to make a decision on my application. I imagine there was just a ton of manual work involved in that. So as I got more familiar with technology and got to talk to more and more people, both in your seat as a real estate investor and people actually managing the properties, we just realized there's a ton of structural inefficiency in the space. The way that we accept applications, the way that we screen tenants, the way that even we sign leases has not really changed in 20 years. There's plenty of companies who would tell you that they're disrupting the space, but at the end of the day, the process is sort of the same. You ask someone, hey, how much money do you make? And then they say, I make $100,000. And then you say, okay, that's great. Now I need to see some documents to prove that. You don't know whether those documents are real or fake. So oftentimes we find ourselves relying mostly on credit reports, criminal history, and eviction reports, which are just imperfect proxies for someone's ability to pay rent and their continued solvency. So what we've done is we've stepped in with technology and figured out, okay, what's important information for you, the owner operator, to have about someone. How can we get that in your hands as quickly as possible? And how can we automate all the steps from accepting applications? Obviously, that's been done pretty widespread. Digital applications are commonplace now, but down to ID verification, income verification, employment verification, lease execution, purchase of renter's insurance. These are the things that Findigs is coming in and saying, look, we can use technology and make these a lot more efficient.
So in terms of the process here, talk to us about the implementation process, right? So if someone comes to you today, because the idea here sounds always great, but we want to talk about implementation process, because what we're looking for here, and where Findigs comes in and provides a solution, is you're making the process easier for everyone, right? So it's not only easier for the owner, but it's also easier for the tenant. And that's always a huge one, right? Because if it's something that's a new process, maybe make an owner easier for one party, maybe the seller or the buyer, but the other one, it puts it at a disservice, and it's not a great point. The thing that helps here is it makes that process so much easier, right? Because it like you said, leaving your company 4 times to bring paperwork. I'm sure there's a ton of people listening to the show right now that have been in that same part right there, and they can think about anything, right? So any part right there where I think you have everything, and all of a sudden you're missing a document, and you have to go back and dig for it, and then go back and do these other items. So talk to us about the implementation process. If a person was here today and has a duplex or a 4-unit property or a 100-unit property, what would be the first conversation they would ask? What would be some questions that they would ask to you and the company?
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point, because this is the beauty of technology. When you have structural inefficiencies that have just been the same for so long, it's not a zero-sum game. It's not, I'm going to make life easier for you, the owner or the property manager, and it's going to get harder for you as an applicant or tenant, which is really what's exciting to us. So if you come to me and you say, look, I have a duplex, or I have a 10-unit building, and we're not happy with our screening process right now and our lease execution process. And I'm sure the folks that are managing your properties are smart people, and I'm sure they're putting their due diligence into each underwriting decision. And what we've found is that right now it takes multiple hours of work for every single application to do the vetting, which leads to multiple days of time it takes to make a decision. The first questions we're going to ask are for your current rental application. And we're going to take that, and we have a completely compliant rental application, and we're going to make sure that we're asking all the same questions that you are as part of your application process. We're going to work to understand how you actually make leasing decisions. So, right now we're going to say, Jason, is there a minimum credit score? Is there a minimum income requirement? Are there certain things that you look for that are automatic denials? We're going to work so that all the information we present to you guys is presented in that context.
If an owner really doesn't have a protocol or doesn't have a process, will you make suggestions? If someone's saying, I typically just look for a warm heartbeat, and that's been the only thing I've been looking for, and it's caused me a lot of problems. That's why I'm calling you. Will you give them a backdrop of what standard procedures look like on other properties?
Absolutely. And that's the benefit to, processing a lot of applications, is we can start to see what other smart people are doing. We can inject pieces of that, and we can make suggestions on how to make the best underwriting decisions. I have people all the time that ask me, is this really important? Like, should I really care that someone has a misdemeanor from 5 years ago? Should that impact my leasing decisions? And our answer is pretty much the same. It's, Findigs gives you a level of information that is previously unfathomable. And we do so in a way that's completely transparent to the people that are applying. It's a lot easier for them to supply it. So basically, it's just easier for good people to prove that they're going to meet your requirements and continue to pay the rent. So I think, in a roundabout way to answer your question here, you're going to come to us, and we're going to understand what your application process looks like today. We're going to make sure that we fit in completely with that. We're obviously going to augment that with our own technology. And at the end of the day, the output is a dashboard. It's a dashboard for everyone that applies, or every group of applicants that apply, that's housed directly on the Findigs portal, but it's branded towards your website. So the goal is we should be able to understand your application. If someone applies, you should be able to get a dashboard of all of the useful information that is 100% accurate and 100% verified, that you could possibly need to make a leasing decision in, say, under an hour. Right now, the information that comes in is so scattered, and you're collecting this document, you're looking at that, and then you're calling this employer, and then you're calling this landlord. It takes days to make that leasing decision. And our goal is to make it so someone can apply to one of your units in under 5 minutes. and you can get all the information you need to make a leasing decision in under an hour.
Does the tenant have to do any pre-work to be prepared for that, or is as simple as them showing up, you having the process right there, and then they can put all their information right away, and that's where your decision can come back within an hour?
Yeah, I mean, so I think one of the core pieces of innovation that we have is we've cut out the need for documents. So usually you think, okay, what does someone need to apply to one of my units? And you might tell them, hey, if you're coming to a tour, please bring your last 3 pay stubs and your last tax return and 3 bank statements. Well, that's a lot of work to collect. And it has the distinct downfall of those documents being provided by them. They could be incorrect, they could be falsified, they could be edited. But either way you skin it, it's a lot of work. So instead of doing that, and we take this ethos throughout pretty much everything that we're doing on the screening side of things, we say, look, all we're going to ask you to do is link your primary bank accounts. Findigs connects to over 10,000 domestic financial institutions, which is about 98%. And this allows us to develop insights based on your income, your savings, your employment, payroll transactions, your previous rental history, and using machine learning, we can spit out information that's far more robust than what any leasing manager could possibly do with a highlighter or a pen looking at a bank statement or looking at a pay stub. And you think about this from the tenant side of things, they can all of a sudden apply from their phone. 5 minutes. They don't need to collect all these documents. You're not saying, hey, I just have to go ask my employer for this, pay stub, or, I have to go figure out where my W-2 is. All they have to do is link their bank account, which is totally encrypted, totally secure, and they can do it in 30 seconds.
Got it. So yeah, it's a completely encrypted process from that point. Has there been tenant response in regards to that? Has there been pushback about basically signing up for bank account?
So this is one of the most interesting things that we've seen. We expected to have to do a lot of explaining to people, a lot of getting people comfortable. Obviously in today's day and age, you just have to be hyper vigilant about people's privacy and the way that your data security infrastructure is set up. So we spent a lot of time and put a lot of effort into the copy around that and getting people comfortable. But at the end of the day, it's just such a pain in the ass for them to provide these documents. It's such an invasive process to begin with that having a company like Findigs, which is clearly an established tech company, make it easier. People feel good about that. We're powered by the same technology that powers things like Venmo and PayPal. So consumers are used to it, and we are actually shocked at consumers actually say to us, this is so much better than having to go provide all my bank statements.
Yeah, I think sometimes, you look at the cost benefit, right? And they're like, okay, so maybe it's that level, but you have the security on your side. And now it's cutting out just a ton of discomfort in me, right? Like most people have like direct deposit, now they go chase down banks, bank or deposit stubs, like all these different things that are just so archaic, and people still ask for them, right? Because that's just been the process. So talk to the property management side or the owner side on that. If someone is using some kind of property management software, the only one I can come to mind right now is Cozy, right? So maybe like a Cozy or something like that. That's basically a separate thing, right? It doesn't have to, or does it change out the property management software they're using currently? Because right now this is about leasing, screening applications, and then on the next part, then separately they would have property management software, so there shouldn't be any conflict. Am I correct?
Right. I mean, look, we understand that property management software is the engine that powers your buildings. It's you need it to collect payments and maintenance requests and a zillion other things. And we're not competitive to that. And we understand it's a huge undertaking to say, hey, you should switch away from AppFolio. And that's not what we're coming in and saying. We're saying, look, we've been diligent. We spent 1.5 years building technology to make the application and screening process better. And they probably have their own rental application right now, but our comment is, look, use us for the application. We'll make sure it's a seamless transition into your property management software. We're not asking you to change.
That's great. Yeah, because right now, just because I potentially what happens a lot is someone provides a service, but when they provide the blanket service, there's items in that service that are not always ideal, right? So it's like anything, right? So that you'll see, first thing that comes to mind is contractors, right? There's contractors that are good at roofing, doesn't mean they're good at painting, right? So it's the same thing here. If you have property management software, that doesn't mean all parts of that process are ideal for you, right? So maybe it's good on managing tenants, but it's not good on tracking repairs or maintenance requests, or vice versa, the leasing process. They may just have that as one of the services that is in there. Okay, there's an application, but again, if it's not something that can make the process more seamless on both sides, then you want to look at your alternatives, right? And where that can continue to build out your process. Because for us, a lot of people get into the rental space, typically not to be more busy, right? So we want to buy property that can do a lot of things. Hopefully provide cash flow, potentially provide appreciation, provide net worth built. Typically, we don't want to have another job. We're now chasing around, tenants and other points for 57 items as we're trying to do a leasing process, right? And then now you hope to have a unit that's ready leased, and all of a sudden now you're waiting for them to come back and provide proof of documents that take 3 or 4 or 5 days, and because they're waiting on something else. So the more you can cut down on time in any part of your process, let alone the leasing side, well, that's more money for you, right? So if it takes me, and I'm not sure if you have these numbers, but a typical leasing process for a tenant, and I'm sure it's area to area. But if that leasing process in terms of having tenants come in and see the property, put in an application, get back all their documents, if you can make that an approval within an hour, and a typical process takes down 7 days. Well, think about the average rent loss if you can move the move-in process up a week, right? So let's say $1,000 rent for a month, and you move up a week, and now that's $250 you've just added that you lost that week out, and you do that across 10 units, 50 units, 100 units. I mean, you don't need me to do the math, but that's a substantial amount of money that's being lost per month, per year, depending on how big your portfolio is.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a really good way to look at things. And this is why I love talking to real estate investors, because everything is about, optimizing your returns. And at the end of the day, we're making the process much easier for both sides, which has the intention of doing just that. We want to make it so we're presenting you guys with a verified dashboard. There's no questions about the data that's in there. You're not wondering, does this person actually make $100,000? We can look into their transactions in the bank account, and we can tell you yes or no. Over the last year, this person does, and what that enables when you have that confidence. Because and you tell me what you think on this. I'm really curious to hear your thoughts on this. But within the screening process today, and obviously you're probably one step removed from that, but I feel like there's just this cloud of doubt over it. All of the information is kind of slapped together. You don't really know where it's coming from. And therefore you have to take a really long time to conduct your diligence. You have to look at, in detail at the credit report and in detail at the references, and call and figure out, is this reference their buddy? Like, are they trying to put one over me here?
Yeah.
And to me, that just creates a lot of friction. So I'd be curious to hear about it from your side of things. Is that something that you're seeing a lot?
It's definitely a delay in the process, right? Because and I'm not the direct step there, but from this, there's many times where the items they brought in are not sufficient. So they need to go back and get something that's more sufficient of an item. I do hear that 25 to 30% of the time, right? And so it does delay the process, because potentially the tenant thinks they have the right items, and now they're not given documents. Okay, here's exactly what I need to look for to get back to them. And now they're trying to go recoup items that they're not sure if they're getting you the right item, right? So now there is always that delay or that bit of confusion that definitely carries over. I'm in my home office today, so if you hear little kids crying in the background, they're out there doing some work here, but that's quarantine life as we see it. But in terms of this, if you can have more direct data, it makes the process easier, because you think about the advantage for tenants, right? Well, I give everybody the benefit of the doubt. I want them to be a good tenant, right? So, and if they're a good tenant, I mean, they have nothing to hide, right? So for that point, it's easier for them to just say, yeah, I like this apartment. I want this apartment. I also don't want to be at risk that if, I go in there and try and submit an application, I'm missing my items, that I'm going to leave and it's going to take me a week to get them, that unit's going to get booked out. And here I am again. Right. Trying to find another property, and maybe at the next property they ask me for different items or a different process, and now I'm just spinning my wheels, right? Instead of having someone come in there and say, okay, yeah, so get your information in here, give us an hour, boom, done. When would you like to move in? Because we have it set on this point, and that's what you want to have for every part of your business, right? Because then again, you think about it, the money, the return side, right? The tenant advantage, but also if you have a person that maybe you're doing a big turn, right, on a building, or you're doing a lot of renovations and you have a lot of down, well, that the hours of the time on the leasing person, right? Well, now that leasing person can put that into other areas, maybe better on the customer service approach, maybe better on walking tenants and showing them the units, maybe being able to spend more time, not being crunched with having to go back there and look through this documents and make sure, they're checking boxes, you're doing the right list of items.
I love that. I mean, we have a saying around here that, your leasing agents should be ambassadors, not private detectives.
Yeah.
And the more time that we can get them away from that, the more time that they can, be out there telling people how great the building is and showing and getting those units filled in the top of the funnel from stock.
Yeah, there's actually a study, and I'm going to not give you the right scenarios, but for people that released for after 1 year, there was a study where there's a substantial increase in people to release when the leasing person took the time to walk the unit on the day of moving with people and show them how all the things work. As simple as like, for the microwave, put it in there and press popcorn if you want popcorn. For the fan, you would have these 2 switches for the fan, or things like that actually increased the potential of a person releasing substantially. It was like 30% that they would release compared to someone else who didn't have the time to say, there's your unit, here's your keys, go let yourself in.
Right. Those are always incredible to me, looking at like the good moving experience and your first impression with, your new landlord, just what a difference that makes in long-term retention.
Yeah. In terms of Findigs, you guys nationwide right now, so there's no area you're not servicing?
Correct. Nationwide coverage.
For an owner that wants to talk with you guys, best way to reach out, best way to communicate, best way to reach out to your team and understand more of the process?
You can reach out directly to support@findigs.com. We'll generally get an answer within 5 minutes. We're very active on that. And obviously, if they just mention your podcast here, we'll be sure to take special care of them.
Awesome. Yeah. And we've gone through basically putting together the application process for that. It's seamless. It takes a few minutes. It's literally just boom, 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 you're done and move on to that next step. So yeah, excited to see where you guys go next, what you guys work from there. Yeah. Thanks so much for coming on the show. Super appreciate your time.
Hey, this has been awesome, man. Thanks again.
Thank you. All right. So that's the Jason and Peely project. We will talk to you shortly. Bye now.
Join us for your second cup of coffee every Monday through Friday at noon.
Live every day, bringing us our best content we've done so far. Super excited, super engaging, bunch of great guests. We're here to answer your questions, and we so appreciate you listening. Make sure to check this out.
Can't wait to see you.